All right, assalamualaikum guys. It's 5:05, so I think this is probably a good time to start, and I'll just let people in whenever they come through. All right, assalamualaikum guys. It's 5:05, so I think this is probably a good time. So assalamualaikum guys. Guys, it's 5:05, so they come through. All right, assalamualaikum guys. Okay, can y'all hear me?
You're good.
Okay, so sorry. I don't know if y'all heard that, but there was my voice 100 times. Anyways, thank you all so much for joining. I'm so happy to see so many of you coming in and, putting in the effort to learn and to grow. As you all know, this event is called Towards Sacred Togetherness, Dismantling Anti-Blackness in the Muslim Community. And what really influenced 901 Ummah to organize this event is because, as we all are familiar with in the past few days with the brutal killings of Arbery and Breonna Taylor and Yasin Muhammad and so many more people, there was definitely a wave of social media activism that, we were also really proud to be a part of. But we also felt that it wasn't enough just for us to post on our social media, just for us to share a story. We felt that it is really necessary for us to start this conversation about anti-Blackness within our own community. And so the way that we structured this panel is that we're going to start off with a discussion about anti-Black social norms in the Muslim community, and that will be presented by Sister Fatima Darbo and Sabria Shah. And then we'll be talking about how non-Black Muslims can become better allies to the Black community, and that'll be presented by Sister Zahra Chowdhury and Brother Atta. And then we'll end off with a Q&A session. And then lastly, we'll just have a resources presentation, just a few resources that you guys could look into that feature like books to read and movies to watch and places to visit here in Memphis to learn more. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand off the mic to Sabria and Fatima.
Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam. Okay, so I hope all of you guys are doing well. I'm very excited to have this conversation because this is something that I think it's been necessary for like years, but there hasn't really been a push to start it. So this is like a great conversation. I'm glad you all came because it really shows you guys are like putting in the work, not just like the hashtag things, but you were actually doing the work because we want to like grow. So first of all, is my sound good? I just want to make sure. Okay. Good, alhamdulillah. Okay, so like you said, this is really started off by the killings and I guess social media hype of the killings of like Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many more. And we really want to keep the wave going. Like, I think that this is an opportunity. This is nothing new. This is the first thing I would want to say. I think a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like this is so terrible, but this is like every day. There's basically every 24 hours, there's a Black man, and then there's also many Black women that are killed by police and just like by racist things in general. So this is like nothing new. But it's great that we're talking about it because I guess that's one of the good things about these kind of things being filmed, even though there's not that many great things at all, but at least it starts conversations and it gets more people involved. So we did want to talk about within our Muslim community, because I think that a lot of people are like the systemic stuff, like, like prison abolishment, like, getting rid of the police and like ICE and all these things, but we don't necessarily have full control over those things, right? But the only things that we do can have control over is ourselves and our reactions and how we act and what we think and things like that. So that's where we really can start change, because I think if people change within themselves, like everyone does, then hopefully then we can change the system, because maybe somebody in here will be writing future policies, or they will be in the social justice space or in the politics space. So like, that's why we do want to start with like individual change, because that's where most things are going to happen. So within our Muslim community, I've been Black all my life. I've been Muslim all my life. And so it's been a really interesting experience. I love my community. I love being Muslim. I would always say that, but it's not always the best experience. And I recognize that a lot of times it's from ignorance. So I don't usually blame people. Like, I don't think most people that I've come across has like ever been like a hatred thing. But a lot of it's just like a very ignorance thing. And then sometimes with that ignorance, we can become very stubborn and like thinking that we're always right and we are not willing to grow. So with that, I kind of wanted to talk about with connecting to George Floyd. So a lot of time, like the worst thing about this was that, you know, people are like, you know, this guy's like knee is on his neck and he couldn't breathe, right? So he's just like contributing to the death. And I want you guys to know, like, George Floyd is not a one and done experience. So even with the whole, like, if these people get convicted, there are still so many other people out there, and it's really about a system that was built on this type of oppression. But I want us to focus on us. So how are we contributing to this type of oppression? So we might not necessarily have our knees on the necks of George Floyd, or we're not necessarily contributing to the physical death of Black people, but are we contributing to the spiritual death of Black people? Because I will tell you, I've met multiple people that don't go to masajid, and then they end up just going away from Islam because of experiences that they've had with the Muslim community. I will tell you a personal experience. I remember when I was like 14, so we were going to my dad worked in one of the masajid here, and we were going to some youth event. He wasn't running it, but like it was like a group running it, and they were like, you know, you should come, blah, blah, blah. So I was literally on my way, we're driving there, and then halfway there, I just like started crying. Like I just like burst out crying, and like my dad was like, what's going on? And he was like, what's wrong? Like I was like, no, like please don't make me go. Like I don't want to go to this event, like please. And like I don't usually have that type of reaction. Like I'll just take stuff and I'll go with it. But like something had just built up within me that was like so tired of like constantly hearing things and constantly getting asked questions, and then constantly like being ignored, and like people not talking to me literally because like first they didn't know me. It's like they did know me, but they didn't really want to become my friend because like they're like, I had heard things all the time. People are like, oh, you know, Sabria thinks she's like such an independent Black woman, which I was like, I literally don't even know what that means. Like I'm 14, like I don't know where that comes from. Or like she's like, you know, like these kind of things where people always ask me like, are you a convert? Like, do you know how to pray? You know, like just like questions that are like so unnecessary that you would never ask anybody else. You know what I mean? Like you would never ask like your Arab Muslim brother or sister, like, do you know how to pray? Like, girl, I learned how to pray when I was 3. You know what I mean? Like, don't come to me. But it gets to a point where it's just like so much, and like you don't want to have to like fight every time you go to a masjid. You know what I mean? Like you go to a masjid for like a spiritual like experience, not to be like bombarded with questions or like being harassed or like feel like you're ignored or feel like people don't want to talk to you because like they don't even know you, but they don't want to pray next to you. And so that's why I really want to say like that it's physical death is terrible, but also like spiritual death. And I don't want to be like, I hope none of us want to be the people like on the day of judgment when, you know, somebody's saying like Allah asked somebody, of course, like that's their thing. Like if they decide to leave Islam, like that's up to them. But I don't want my name to come up when they're like, you know, these were some of the people that affected the reason why I started becoming really distant, because we do a lot of times attach our connectedness to Allah with our connectedness community. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I feel like really connected to my Muslim brothers and sisters. That might not be right all the time, but that's just what happens. Like so because of this, then I become closer to Allah. And so I feel like these are the people that are representing Islam. And we say that we're representing Islam, where I say we're representing the Prophet, where I say we're representing the Quran, but like, are we really doing that? Because I'm going to say like a lot of times, and I've seen it a lot, especially on social media now with the hype, everyone wants to be involved and they want to be part of the movement. And so a lot of times people will like quote this ayat from the Quran, like Hujurat 13, like everyone has that memorized now. I promise you. Like, you know, you say like, you know, Black Lives Matter, or like this happened to me within this message. Yeah, but like, you know, the Quran says like Allah created the nations and tribes. Okay, what does that mean? Are you living that? You know what I mean? And he tells us to know one another. We don't ever we should never take the Quran or take the Sirah or take the Prophet's life or what he says as just like, these are just words. So I can just give you words and that's it. Are you acting on it is what's really important, because that's what I see. You can tell me anything all day, but I don't see you acting on it, then I'm not going to take it. So that's why it's like, that's why we kind of called it sacred togetherness, is because that's the point of all of this, right? Like the point of us learning about how to get over our anti-Blackness and things like that is so that we can become a tighter community to actually fulfill these qualities that we say that we have, that we say we portray that we have, that we are like, you know, Muslims. When we talk to other people, you know, Muslims are like one of the most diverse group of people like in America or in the world. Like there's so many like there's Muslims from Asia, there's Muslims from Africa, like, but okay, are you actually living up to what that means? Do you actually make relationships with people that are not like you? There are so many people like Memphis. I know we're really blessed to have like really strong, independent cultural communities, but that means that a lot of times people stay in those cultural communities. You do not go outside of it. You know what I mean? And I think it's good. It's great to be connected to your cultural community. Like Allah didn't make you in that for some reason. And I think you do draw a lot of safety from that, but you don't always want to be safe. Like you're never going to get anywhere if you're just being safe your whole life. You know what I mean? Like no one who's been successful has just kind of gone status quo, been safe their whole entire life. So this is why these things are important. So some reasons I think that these things happen is because one, colonialization, right? So like a lot of communities, they've been colonized. So they do have a lot of like colonizers mindsets. So like, you know, you've been trained to think that people that are darker are bad. And so, and like, especially when you come here, like, so people who are darker, like black people are the black people, you know what I mean? And we've been trained to think that people who are on top, like just by power, money, wealth, like those are the people that we want to be with. But I think a lot of that conversation changed when a lot of people realized that they don't necessarily want you. You know what I mean? And I think for us, it wasn't necessarily 9/11. It was probably other things. For older generations, I think they realized that shift when 9/11 happened, because then there were like, people were like, oh, like the Muslims, like, hold up. And so for us, though, I think it's different because you've been going to like private schools, or you've been going to public schools, and you might have had bad relationships with people because like you were a Muslim. But I still think that as Muslims, Black people are one of your biggest allies. One, because a lot of Black people are Muslims. Still, the majority here of Muslims are Black people. Second, a lot of Black people have Muslim families. So for even if they're not Muslim, they know what it's like. You know what I mean? They'll be like, oh yeah, like my cousin, like he says that. I live in Midtown, and I live across the street from Midtown Mosque. And I would walk down the street one day and people are like, Salam alaikum, like don't know anything. Or they just say like, alhamdulillah, or something like that. Like they're not Muslim at all. They've never like read the Quran, none of that, but they know what it's like because they have Muslim family. So these are really your allies. When we talk about like the Sirah, and we talk about people who were the Ansar, like these are your people that are going to help you, and they're going to connect with you and have social status. I think one thing that I've seen with this whole thing is that if you look around the world, like how many countries all over are doing the whole Black Lives Matter thing, like having protests, like in places like Ireland. Like I would never think, I literally would never think that in Ireland they would have like a Black Lives Matter thing. So you see like the power that Black people have like culturally and socially. So that's what you really want to tap into. So the further away you get from that, as you're trying to go towards power or wealth or whatever, like you're going to start losing that. And I've been seeing that because a lot of Black people are starting to lose connection with the Muslim community because of instances they've had where people, and like that's like outside of people who are Muslim, but within the Muslims, like if I have a bad relationship, if I go to the masjid and someone calls me Abid, like I'm not coming back, I promise you. I won't come back. So like what are the things that you like know? So, and to know that those things like aren't okay. So for a lot of people here, you guys have, the reason why you're here is probably because like I need to, I want to change, or you've already recognized it. So, but what does that mean? Everybody in the community isn't here. So when you do learn those things, then it's your job to kind of correct those things. It's not necessarily Black people's job to always tell you those things. You know what I mean? If you, like, I was watching a live the other day with this lady, the village auntie on Instagram, and she was saying, like, if you don't know how to talk, if you don't know how to treat your Muslim brother and sister, you don't need me to tell you that. You need to go to the Quran and this, like the Sirah, like, you know what I mean? Like, they like literally had these lived experiences. This is why I don't like just like putting things out there like, oh, the Prophet's last speech. Like, no, like there were literally instances of Bilal. There were so many other Black Sahaba, but Bilal's the one we know most. So like of Bilal, literally when he wanted to make the adhan, like when the Prophet said he was going to make the adhan, everyone thinks like, oh, like it was all accepted because they had all gotten over their anti-Blackness or whatever. Like they were literally Muslims who were like, no, like please don't let this man go up here. We don't want him up there because we don't want him to represent us. Not because they thought he was like anything wrong, but except that he was Black. So like, no, realize that those things happen. And so we do go back to the Quran and Sunnah and the Sirah, not out of just like, see, this is like super egalitarianism, but because they did have these problems because they were people. And so we learned how those things got solved. Like the Prophet said, he put him up there because of that, like partially because he wanted that to be shown. You know what I mean? Like he was perfect, so he knew what he was doing. Islam is perfect, the Prophet is perfect, Quran is perfect, but you as a Muslim are not. I promise you. How many Muslims don't pray? So like you can't say every Muslim holds up every Islamic value. So that's why we do need to learn, like, and we need to unlearn. And so, but we connect that to the Sierra, we connect that to the Quran. Like, so Allah like tells us literally through that like you do need to change. Like, you're not, just because you're Muslim or whatever, like doesn't mean you are going to be perfect. So that is kind of an example of that. And so I wanted to talk about allyship also with that, because there is I listened to this talk today by Asada Aisha Prime. So she's also a good person to like connect with and learn from. She's like an amazing teacher, mashallah. So she was talking about the story that a lot of us know about, like Bilal and like, you know, like when he got crushed with the stone. So this was when they were still in Mecca and they were getting persecuted. So Bilal, the Quraysh like were crushing him, not with a stone, a boulder. So they were literally putting a boulder on him because he was like, and they're trying to tell him like go stay away from Islam and say that you don't like believe in la ilaha illallah and all these kinds of things, right? And so when the Prophet learned about this, he immediately told Abu Bakr, like, go support him, like go stand up for him, like use whatever resources you have, like use your money, whatever your status among the Quraysh, like to get to like help this man. And like that's what allyship is, not because like, oh, like this poor man, like he needs our help or whatever. No, like because he's your Muslim brother and he's standing with us. And even if they're not Muslim, like at the end of the day, like just because a Black person isn't Muslim doesn't mean you're not going to stand with them. Like these are your human brothers and sisters, like, and that's what you need to learn. And the biggest thing about this is like you will never understand what it's like to be Black in America, like, and that's okay. Like, no, I'm not telling you to do that. I'm not trying to be like, you need to know like every single thing. I don't know every single thing. All these books they're gonna put, I'm gonna tell you I have not read all of them. But the important thing is to learn and to empathize. And because Black people really in America, the fight isn't just about like, oh, like these policemen or like whatever, like this is a whole system of white supremacy, and that white supremacy is all over the world. But this one has probably been the most long-standing one because like we've been here for 400 years under these people for like 400 years, right? So this is the most long-standing thing. And so that's why if like these kind of things get abolished and this system is overturned, then it's a good sign for all these other places that want to get rid of that system. Because if this is the strongest, most long-standing like idea of white supremacy and that gets overturned, then what does that mean for the people who've been in countries for like 50 years or like 60 years? Like you can do it, you know what I mean? So this is why like you do need to kind of support these things. And just because that as a group, like we do believe in standing up for justice, even against ourselves. So that's why it's important to recognize what injustice do you have within yourself. You know, like if you have that within yourself, but you think you don't, how are you going to be out here telling people, oh, like, you know, people need to care for Black people or people need to stop being racist. But like you are, you don't look good if you're trying to say something to me, but I can tell, like, I see it in you. You know what I mean? So you kind of need to get rid of that, like within yourself and recognize that. And the best way to do that is kind of do a lot of self-reflection. So when you have these times when you're like coming across Black people or you're in situations where people are saying Abid or like Kalu or like whatever they say, or say, you don't even necessarily have to say derogatory words. A lot of times it comes off in just like what people think. So like they'll say, like, for example, I remember one time when I was like 15, this girl was like, oh, like Sabria, like you do this because like it's like a ghetto thing, right? And I was like, first of all, it was like something that was like totally inappropriate. And I was like, first of all, you've never seen me do that in your entire life. You've known me for years. You have never seen me do that. Second of all, what does that mean? You know, like, can you even tell me what ghetto means? If you can't even tell me the definition, then don't use words that you don't understand, you know? So like, a lot of times, like, it just takes learning and it takes reading and it takes watching. And now it's so easy. I don't really believe anymore that people like can be like people our age, like older people, I might give them more of a pass. But people our age, like, no, like there's so many resources. You watch Netflix all day, watch a documentary. You know, like you sit there and read every single you like watch every meme video, whatever. Like you can watch a 5-minute YouTube video on like racism. You know, like, you know, there's really not many excuses. Or even talking to people, I don't think you should just go to like random Black people and like ask them like every single question. It's not appropriate because you would never do that to anybody else. But you can ask people that you might have a relationship with, like, if they feel uncomfortable with something you said, don't get defensive. Like, just like be open to it, you know? Like, okay, maybe that was wrong. And where did that thinking come from? A lot of times we just have to get to the root of the problem, which is like, we don't want to just get surface things like, oh, like you said that word. What does that mean? Like, you shouldn't say Abid. Okay, but why do you think that people, like, why do you think it's okay for that? Like, why do you relate slaves into Black people? You know, like, go to the actual root of the problem. Like, do deeper thinking. Don't just do like surface level things, because people That's why we have these issues. Like it just starts with like little forms of racism. That's why I mean like spiritual death. Like it starts with like little forms of racism. It's not always like you have to go out and kill somebody. You know, like it's just like little things, and that's why people get driven away. Like I'm gonna tell you, I did not go to one mosque for like 4 years because I was just like so over it. Because every time I went, I would get these like flashbacks and like bad memories that I had, like just like interactions with people that I was like, I can't do it. Like I grew and I was able to be like, okay, like you got to get it together. But like some people can't handle that necessarily. Like for example, I've been in the Muslim community my whole life, so like I've been more able to adapt to certain things. But like there are people who are converts, there are people who are new to the community. You have to be super aware. Like that's the thing. Everything about Islam and in general, like, is about awareness. Like that's why we have like intentions, right? So like what's your intention behind things? And you have to be aware. You can't just go on cruise control every day of like any interaction you have, like you're just on cruise control, just doing whatever you learned or whatever you think is cute. Like no, think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're saying. Sorry, I'm like talking. Tell me if one of my time's up. So those are some of the things I wanted to talk about. I just like really push like being aware, and then just like doing a lot of reading, a lot of self-searching, because this is where a lot of your justice is going to come from. Even now, like a lot of times I think people are so confused. I've literally had people message me like, I signed this petition and I called this person, like now what do I do? Because like there's nothing really you can do. Like you can't go out there and like convict somebody. You're not the cops, you're not whatever. So what can you do is you can change yourself, you can change your own house. And that's where like you can change the people that are around you. You can hold your friends accountable. Not saying that every time someone says something you need to be like, don't ever talk to me again, like we can't be friends. Like no, you want your friends to be better, so call them out in a way that is like appropriate, and a way that you'll think that they'll take it. Or if you think someone else is better to handle that, go ahead and give it to that person. Like, hey, like what do you think? But that's why reading and knowing is so important, because you can't call something out that you don't know. Even sometimes I think we know, like by our fitra, like we understand that like this is wrong, like I just feel it, but I don't necessarily know what it is. So that's why you have to have knowledge of like what are these things, like what are these mindsets that I have, what are these like biases that I have, like what anti-Black things have I learned, and how do I unlearn them, how do I break those things? So just being really around people. That's why I want to say like most of these issues, this is why I wish we could be in person. Most of these issues come from not being around other people. Like you're just around, you're in your little like hole of like the same people as you. But if you go to other places, you might have that discomfort, and like that's okay. Like it's part of growing. No one's saying you have to be out here and then you're gonna know every single thing just by reading one book. No one has the answers. Nobody. If they tell you they have all the answers, they're lying. I promise you. So like, but that discomfort is like where you grow, like where you learn. So where do like those things that I think like if I go to a Black masjid or a Black organization, I see someone like, and now I'm uncomfortable, because that discomfort starts that starts where people start calling the cops and whatever. But like, why do you have that discomfort? So sit with that for a little bit. Like, you know, like where did that come from? Is it valid? You know, like, am I just uncomfortable because it's a Black man or this is a Black person? Or am I uncomfortable because someone called me out? And is that discomfort okay? Like, discomfort's okay. That's where people learn. That's where you grow. So that's just do a lot of soul searching, and then talk to people and like learn, and know that this is your duty. I honestly believe this work is part of being a Muslim, especially here, because these are the people we are told so much, like in this era, like about taking care of your neighbor. Now these are your neighbors. Like these are the people that you're with. And if they go down, I promise you're going to go down, because like if Black people are not accepted, you are not going to be. I'm going to tell you that like right now, because you're new. Like as people like from other cultures, like you're new. So as the people who haven't been here for so long aren't going to be in it, or you could just assimilate, you could do that, but then you're compromising on so much of what values you had. So don't just be surface level, and don't just take people like, oh, you know, we have Muhammad Ali. Okay, would you even like invite Muhammad Ali to your house? Don't even play. You know what I mean? Would you be comfortable calling Muhammad Ali? Like, would you call the police on Muhammad Ali? Like, don't just say things and don't put things out there without doing a lot of reflection. So I hope that made sense. And then feel free to ask any questions. It was kind of just like throwing it together. So bismillah. Fatima can go, but if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in. Like we said, like this is like more conversation as much as we can get, and conversations are important because that's where things really change, not just sitting and reading like any Twitter thread. Like you need to actually talk to people, because that's how your heart will get affected, and then your brain will hopefully follow along. But I'm done.
All right. On that note, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fatima Darbo. kind of some background on me. Some of you guys might know me since I was born and raised here in Memphis. But, I kind of became a recluse around high school. So, I went to Pleasant View from pre-K to 8th grade, like I think a lot of people here actually. And then, I went to, or been going to Mesh Islam all my life. So I've been interacting with all kind of sides of the community. And so, I reflect as a community. I think we want people from our community to, talk to us. And we want to talk to people from our community because those are people that, are being immediately affected around us. And so my first thing I want to say is, as we come here to talk about, realize and remember we're here as brothers and sisters, and we're family here, as one ummah, as we always, quote the ayah and the hadith, and, we're a family here. The, Black Muslim community has always seen our, Muslim brothers and sisters as our family. And so we're critiquing you, but if you critique your family, how do you do it? It's always out of love. It's always because you want them to improve themselves, for your sake and for your sake, right? And so, we're here out of love. This whole session is out of love so that we can all together get to Jannah, right? And, on that path of getting to Jannah, racism, racial injustice, implicit biases, I think I said the wrong word, but microaggressions, prejudice, things like that are not on that path to Jannah, okay, that we're all trying to get to together, as a family, as a ummah. So that's kind of just the first approach, so that we don't come and approach the subject defensively or, or feel like Black people are attacking us. We're critiquing out of love. So, going forward, right, this conversation towards sacredness, like going forward, I think there's kind of two main things that we need to do. And that is first to acknowledge, and second to listen. And so acknowledgement is about acknowledging that there's a problem in the first place, right? Like I was saying, not feeling like we're attacking you. The divide was already there. We're not victimizing ourselves. We are already victims, period, right? So we're not making stuff up. And, so the first step for you to conversate with us is to acknowledge that these problems were there. And I think kind of what I've been seeing, right, recently is that, or on social media and et cetera, is that the Muslim community is uncomfortable with that acknowledgement. And I think there are multiple reasons for it. I think one reason is like, Islam doesn't teach racism, right? And a lot of Muslims don't see themselves as racist, right? Or knowing that they have biases that they didn't know. They don't see that. And so, change is uncomfortable. Speaking about change is uncomfortable. And I think that's blocking people from wanting to acknowledge, that this is there. They just throw out that we're dividing the ummah and that we are, just trying to hurt problems. And so, let me look at my notes real quick because I'm a little bit ahead of myself, I think. But yeah, okay. So the Muslim community has been complacent, also thinking that they aren't racist themselves. They see the issue that's happening right now, and they think all they have to do is call out some police, call out the police, post solidarity, call out some white racists, right? Point at the president, and they think that's where the job ends, and kind of the Muslim and the Black Muslim community is actually, no, that's not where it ends. Our community needs self-reflecting, and so it's making people uncomfortable, Muslims uncomfortable. It's like, I'm not racist. What do you mean? And so, but there's a lot of like microaggressions happening in our community that actually, those are things that build up and cause kind of divide and cause pain to your brothers and sisters, right? And even if you just look up about relationships, for example, it's actually the little stuff that cause your problems, over time. The little microaggressions are because they speak to a bigger problem, that is that we communicate with each other, and we don't maybe even care sometimes, right, enough to address these little problems that add up. And so let's see, kind of a reaction I've been seeing that's kind of reflective of this, not wanting to acknowledge it, is like the Black Lives Matter but kind of statement. Black Lives Matter, but people in my country are suffering worse than or have been suffering also, things like that. And when you word a statement that way, you kind of already override what you said before the but, right? You say I understand, but you're kind of overriding what you said before. So when you say but matter, but it kind of says like these other people matter more to you than your Black brothers and sisters, and you don't have to word it that way. It doesn't have to be worded that way. I'm Black and American, right? But my parents are from Gambia. If I wanted to, I could be like, oh, Black people, y'all want to talk about yourself right now, but you never talked about Gambia. Gambia has poverty. Gambia has, we just got rid of a dictator. There's so much economic issues. I could have done that, but I don't want to do that because right now, I'm expressing solidarity to my Black brothers and Muslim brothers and sisters that are suffering here as well. So we don't have to kind of approach the subject that way, especially if we're trying to have a conversation. If we say we're trying to dialogue with each other, we don't have to approach the subject that way. And so, kind of some microaggressions and issues that are happening in the community that we need to acknowledge. I just listed them because I think all of these need deeper conversations. That this is just the beginning. We should continue later on and have conversations about these things. But I think these are experiences that Black Muslims have in our communities that we need to talk about, and address. So to list them out, one of them is like kind of always approaching Black culture as it's haram, and just labeling all Black culture as haram, blanket statement. That hurts. You don't even take the time to research or know the history of it, or and the first thing is dreads are haram, Black music is haram. That's it. Blanket statement. That's kind of one thing we hear in the community. Using abid, the N-word, any other racial slur. I feel like we've said it 1,000 times and people still do it, and that just kind of shows that people are not listening to us. We heard it when we were kids. Our siblings still hear it now. So that means the problem is not being solved. It's still, and no one's listening. My siblings still get told stuff like, I don't like Black people, brown people aren't invited. And people still make the Oreo joke and it's not funny. Like, I can't see you in the dark. You're an Oreo, whatever. It's not funny. We need to stop these things. People not wanting to pray beside you. And I mentioned a lot of these, I think Sabrina probably mentioned. Black, people being asked to like read Quran as if you weren't Muslim all your life, those kind of things. Like, why do we do this to, your brothers and sisters? Actually, this one's also random, but the moon sighting issue this year really hurt a lot of Black Muslims. And like, I think this one should be talked about later, but seriously, a lot of Black Muslims are hurt over it. And the point is, again, are you going to listen to them or are we just going to dismiss it again? And next year, the same thing happens, right? And so those are just some, right? We just scratched the surface listing some of the things that Black Muslims go through in our community that we need to address. There are microaggressions, biases that we don't think is a problem, but it is. It's hurting us. And so, like I said, the second step is to listen. And so, your Black Muslim brothers and sisters are hurting, whether you agree with it or not. And you, as as their, ally, right? You said that you care about them. So now the next step is to listen. But the importance is, how are you listening? Are you listening to just rebuttal, to throw your rebuttal in for everything they say, to disagree with them, to be defensive? Are you listening to do that? Or are you listening to like sit with your discomfort and like, and be like, okay, where are my biases coming from? Or, what are the things that I'm doing that I didn't even know was hurting my brothers and sisters? How are you listening? Are you listening, to hear us and have a conversation after that? And so also, like, I understand also that activism, for example, is not easy, right? You know, going out to protest and like, you know, doing things like that is not easy. But the work within your own community, within your own family, within or on you, within you as well, right, is what Allah will hold you accountable for. You know, I mean, if you don't go protest, if you didn't post on social media, but you've been talking maybe to a family member that has, you know, certain ideas, I commend you on that. You know, that's what we need. That's the kind of stuff that will make us feel together. That's the kind of stuff that will stop, you know, us feeling left out of place when we go to the masjid and someone's staring you down the whole time. Or even when you go to, sometimes it's like you're invited to your own friend's house and somebody there is just staring you down the whole time, and it makes you so uncomfortable, you know. But if you're having these conversations within your own community, within your own family, we can start eradicating this and start making our Black Muslim brothers and sisters feel like they're actually welcome, you know, in this ummah and in the community. And kind of just one thing I really kind of just wanted to put out there is that if we don't do this now, next time Black people raise their voices against injustice, and the Muslim community hasn't vetted itself. And let me point out that there's gonna be a next time. That's the problem here, right? This is the country we live in. This is the world we live in. There's gonna be a next time. There's gonna be another Black person killed by the police. There's gonna be, you know, another incident, and so Black people will be raising their voices again, you know. And you know, if we don't do this now and vet ourselves now, when the problem arises again, the Muslim community will be turning the spotlight right back to the Muslim community again, because that means we didn't solve the problem. So that's all I have, inshallah. Next up is Zahra, and you know, I give you actual action items, you know, on how to move forward, inshallah. So.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As Sister Fatima just said, my segment of the talk is going to be primarily towards non-Black Muslims listening in and whoever may watch this after it's been posted. But this is primarily tips on what you guys can do, non-Black Muslims, to help your fellow Black Muslims, Muslim brothers and sisters, and, you know, Black Americans, you know, African Americans and brothers and sisters in humanity as well. So, Bismillah. A lot of times in instances like these, we have an impulse in us. We ask, what can I do to help, right? We see an injustice and we come out the woodworks. We ask, what can I do to help? How can I help? What can I do? So for non-Black Muslims, these are just a few concrete steps you can do that can make a world of difference, right? It can make a world of difference on the communal scale, on the spiritual scale. And in Islam especially, there's utility in small but consistent deeds, okay? Everyone thinks they need to be some sort of like trailblazer or like, you know, have like a headline defining protest movement in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. But really, small but consistent deeds, they can do, it's the small stuff that slips through the cracks. So racism, people like to focus on the big picture racism, the insidious racism, the really, really egregious racism. But people don't notice the small bits that contribute to it. People don't notice the small pebbles that build up to a mountain. So by us doing our small parts, but consistent parts to combat anti-Blackness in the Muslim community, we do a world of good. We do a world of justice, right? So I want to relate a hadith. Salama reported, the most beloved deed to the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is what is done regularly, even if it is small, right? So these, I want to give 3 concrete steps that non-Black Muslims can do to help their Black Muslim brothers and sisters. And please, guys, think about what I'm saying, ponder what I'm saying, and reflect on the actions, because a lot of people are watching how you behave. A lot of people are watching how we conduct ourselves, conversations, and within ourselves and with other people. And people see these things. People can be either hurt or uplifted by these things. So without further ado, I'll get started. So the first step, it's been touched on previously, is acknowledgement, right? One of the most sinister ways we perpetuate racism in the American Ummah is through erasure, right? We make the all too subtle mistake of erasing Black Muslims through a false binary. So what do I mean by that? Well, we like to think that there's a Muslim community, and we like to think that there's a Black community, right? It could be in even statements that sound progressive when you say them out loud, right? Like the Muslim community must stand in solidarity with the Black community, or the Muslim community stands with the Black community. these sound progressive, these sound nice, but they sound benign, but the undertone is missed. What's the implication? The implication is that Black and Muslim, they're two separate entities. They're not the same. So this is the first thing we must address. We need to stop making Islam and Black separate, okay? The fact of the matter is the story of American Islam is the story of Black Islam. We like to think that the Muslim community in the US especially is a new community. We think that it came with our parents in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. We think of Muslim, we think of Arab, Desi, we think of lighter skin, we think of foreign immigrants. Some people may take it even a step further, right? They may even consider Black immigrants, and they may even consider African American converts, but they don't consider that there's always an element of it's new to the country. Indigenous African Americans, they don't have any element of Islam. It's been brought over. This is a very toxic idea, guys, and it does a lot of damage because it just erases a lot of the contributions that Black American Muslims made in this country, contributions that without their contributions, there would not be a leg for us to stand on today. So I'm going to give just a brief history of Black Islam because it shows that they made a huge contribution. So the arrival of enslaved Africans to these shores predates the founding of the nation, right? It outpaces 1776. Muslims were here in this land before the founding of the United States of America. So the contributions of those enslaved Muslims are the foundations on which this Muslim community is built. We need to acknowledge this, okay? How so? Well, it was because of African Americans, the Quran was preserved for decades on tongues, in hearts, and on pages, in text in the United States, okay? Let's go from way back then all the way to a few generations ago. It was the contributions of the civil rights movement, okay, the Black-led civil rights movement here in the US that gave us the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. This act is what, it opened the gates for our parents to come, our grandparents, speaking to the non-Black Muslim brothers and sisters. And of course, the classic example, you can't any corner of this country, okay, from Alaska to New York, you can't go anywhere in this country and any Muslim community in the US without hearing the story of someone who converted to Islam after reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, okay? This is really important stuff, guys, because we like to think, what's the problem, right, with this, right? The implication is that we have the authentic Islam. We have the real Islam. We have the Islam, TM, trademark, okay? But by erasing the contributions made by African-American, Black Muslims here in America, contributions that date centuries, that again, date before the founding of the United States, we do a huge disservice. So I just want to give a few names to acknowledge throughout history. There's Muhammad Yaro, there's Bilali Muhammad, there's Abdurrahman ibn Ibrahim Suri. One of the most famous is Umar ibn Sa'id, whose autobiography preserved the legacy of Muslims in America before white slavers could erase it. So knowing what we know now, I want to ask everyone in the panel and the audience a question, okay? A lot of people contest the phrase Black Lives Matter. A lot of people contest it. Black Lives Matter, man, that's stupid. Like they neglect it, they dismiss it. So I want to ask non-Black Muslims a question, okay? I want to ask them a question. If Black lives did not matter around the time of enslavement, when these contributions are what kept Islam alive in America while immigration was barred, okay? They kept Islam, the candlelight of Islam alive in America. If Black lives did not matter then we would not have the leg to stand on now. We would not have had our parents come into this country. This has direct implications, folks. So another thing, this is all before I even mentioned like Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. Whenever someone says Black Muslims, those are the two pillars, right? Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. And I don't mean to dismiss their contributions whatsoever. They made immense contributions. But it exists more beyond that. It's a foundation of information, a foundation of history, and we have to pay respect to that. So enough with the history just for now. I want to talk about the issue of police brutality specifically, since that's, keep it real, that's why we're here right now. So by separating Muslim from Black, we do a huge disservice to people who fall in the middle, to Black Muslims. Specifically, we do this just an injustice to Black Muslims who suffer from police brutality. So let's go through it. Nia Wilson was a Black Muslim sister. She was killed on her way home by a white guy, 27-year-old male. She was shot dead, okay? She's a Muslim. Nia Wilson, say her name. We have Latifah Wilson, her sister, also killed. 2 Black Muslim sisters killed on the basis of their race by a white man. Say their names. We have Keith Lamont Scott. He was killed by police in Charlotte, North Carolina. He was known around the neighborhood for strolling around with a book tied to his hand. He was always known as like the neighborhood wonk. He always had a book tied to his hand. And so, according to his mother, reporters, they went to his family after he was killed by Charlotte Police Department. They went to his mother, and his mother said Keith Lamont Scott treasured one book in particular. Does anyone care to guess what that book is, right? It's the Quran. Quote, he loved to read that book. This is a CNN article. I'd be more than happy to share the link. So this is the first point. We need to acknowledge that Islam in America is Black Islam. Okay, we need to pay our dues. We need to pay respect. We need to come correct, guys. Okay. And before I move on to the second point, I just want to leave. This was on Twitter. It was a tweet, right? I'm going to read it for you, and I want you guys to think about the issues behind it. I want you guys to think about the implications. So here's the tweet. Nothing was said for Palestine. Nothing was said for Kashmir. Nothing was said for Syria. Nothing was said for Muslims dying. Okay, nothing was said for Muslims dying, and now they criticize us for not speaking about their issue when they never said anything for us ever. Okay, I want you guys to think about what the problem behind that tweet is, considering what I just mentioned. Okay, so on to step 2. We need to stop being in denial, guys. Non-Black Muslims, we need to stop being in denial. Okay, we have to stop being defensive. As Fatima graciously said, we need to, it's critique out of love for the ummah. It's not critique out of like superiority or anything like that, but we need to listen. We need to open up our ears. Anti-Black racism is the elephant in the room in our non-Black Muslim spaces, okay? Anytime these grievances are brought up, anytime that problem is acknowledged, there's a number of responses non-Black Muslims like to use to deflect the problem, to erase it, to la, 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 they don't want to listen to it, okay? So I'm going to go through some of the classic responses. Okay, Islam took care of racism through the Prophet ﷺ. We don't need Black Lives Matter. We don't need Black Lives Matter. We have Islam. Okay, I'm not disputing that, okay? I'm not disputing that Islam is not appropriately anti-racist. I'm not disputing the legitimacy of Islam in preventing racism. But here's what you're doing when someone says that. They don't want to acknowledge the real problems that exist in the Muslim community. The common saying goes, Islam is perfect, Muslims are not. By constantly rejecting Black liberation movements because we have Islam, what you're doing is you're erasing any genuine efforts to correct the problems in Muslim community by using Islam as a crutch, right? Another example is people invoking Bilal, radiallahu anhu, or the Prophet's last sermon, an Arab is not superior than a non-Arab, non-Arab is not superior to an Arab except in piety and except in taqwa. People use these examples just to erase, deflect, go away. I don't want to hear it. We need to stop being in denial, guys. Yes, Islam is a perfect religion. Yes, we are Muslims. We should do everything according to Islam. And because of that, that's why we need Black Lives Matter. I'm going to flip it, okay? Because of Islam, we need Black Lives Matter. Because of Islam, we need these justice movements to help our Black Muslim brothers and sisters and our Black brothers and sisters in humanity. So another one, we're all Muslims. I don't see color. We all bleed red. So basically, it's a little seasoned version of All Lives Matter. It's a really good trick, While no one can argue with the sentiment at face value, it does a good job of erasing or sweeping under the rug issues only certain Muslims, Black Muslims face, okay? It's an obtuse answer and it misses the point. We'll get to All Lives Matter after the panel, but I want to get to step 3. I don't want to drag too long. So step 3 is accountability, okay? This is where we need to take action, non-Black Muslims. We have a divine imperative for justice, okay? We have a divine command to seek justice. This is in the religion. So it's not only enough to be non-racist, okay? You can't just say, well, I'm not racist, job is done, I did my part. No, you can't be non-racist, we have to be anti-racist. So this means we need to call out the racist elements amongst our own. So yes, that means the awkward conversations, the uncomfortable conversations with our loved ones, parents, friends, teachers, relatives, and I hate to say this, I really, really hate to say this, even religious authorities. I really do hate to say that, okay? But it's true, we cannot just ignore that. So I'm going to give an excerpt from Malcolm X in his autobiography. He says it in the context of white liberals, but this is towards non-Black Muslims as well, white or not. So here's the quote. The white people in meeting audiences would throng around me. They would ask me, after I had addressed them somewhere, what can a sincere white person do? By visibly hovering near us, they are proving that they are with us. But the hard truth is, this isn't helping to solve America's racist problem. We aren't the racists. Where the really sincere white people have got to do their proving of themselves is not among the Black victims, but out on the battle lines of where America's racism really is, and that's in their own home communities. America's racism is among their own fellow whites. That's where sincere whites who really mean to accomplish something have got to work. So this is the end of the quote. So guys, it's great that this movement, everyone's taking an opportunity to go on their social media and post stuff. Okay, that's great. It's great to acknowledge people. It's great to send text to your Black friends and your Black Muslim friends, like, I'm with you, I'm standing in solidarity with you. That's all great. But you cannot stop there. Why? Because it's easy to do that. It's easy when you look left, you look right, you look on Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, the news. Everyone is saying what they're supposed to say. It's not so easy when your dad says something racist and you have to correct him. It's not so easy when you're walking the street with a group of friends and you're trying to interrupt a good time, joking around, and make things serious and make things awkward. Okay? But that's the fact of the matter. That's what we need to do. That's our obligation. And, I'm upfront. I admit, like, in the past and, growing up and as I learned these new things, I was scared to do this as well until I realized that now I have no choice. Now I need to step out. I need to push my boundaries. I need to get out of my comfort zone, because what we do, we put our personal investment into the struggle. We sacrifice a bit of ourselves, our complacency, our comfort, our privilege, maybe even our friendships. We sacrifice those for justice. By doing that, we put a part of ourselves with the Black Muslim brothers and sisters struggling with this issue. So just on a parting note, many companions were willing to leave their homes in Mecca to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we should consider doing at least these small few things to help. And so with that, I'm going to transition the talk to Zahra. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum. Wow, subhanAllah. I can't go after all three speakers and come out with something amazing. So inshallah, know that it's gonna be something small, and this is all what I all the tips with you, all the action items are things that help me personally, and I'm not just oh, I searched it up and I'm no, these are things that I try to practice every day in my life. And I want to thank Miriam from 901 and Sabria for inviting me to come speak here today. So I agree with everything all my previous speakers have said. And so now inshallah I'll start. So in your journey to allyship or organizing your activism as all Muslims here, so the first thing you need to remember is that we're in this world, or we're in young, or Allah put us here to seek His pleasure. That is our sole purpose. So whatever we do in our, journey to support our Black peers, our Black Muslim and non-Muslim brothers and sisters, or any other community, our job is to seek pleasure. We're not seeking someone else's pleasure. This is not a trend. This is not a one-time thing. So whatever you do, it cannot be a moment. It has to be a movement. So that's the first thing. And whatever you do, make sure you are consistent. Kind of referencing back what Atta was saying with that hadith, is that in Allah's eyes, the deeds that are big, or the deeds that matter, are the small ones and the consistent ones. So I think the first that you need to, as an individual, because I was saying, is that we don't have control over everything. We don't have control of government. We don't control over, NPD, but we have control over our own selves and our own actions. And so the first thing you need to do is to self-reflect. Think about what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And in your weaknesses, understand that it's okay to find flaws. We are all flawed people, and we have grown up in cultures that have taught us implicit biases. We've grown up with it, and it's things that you don't realize. And also learn how to point them out in your communities and in your cultures and within yourself. And realize that it's okay, you're gonna be flawed. Racism is a sickness, but it's something that you can combat. And even the Sahaba, the best generation, the generation we consider the best of the best, struggled with this. And Atta was saying earlier, a lot of Muslims try to deny this and say oh, Islam is not racist. Absolutely, Islam is perfect. The Quran is perfect. Our Prophet, perfect. But we as Muslims are not. And even the Sahaba were not. So going back to the story of Abu Dhar, when he, out of his anger, when he thought Bilal didn't answer his salam, he said something absolutely derogatory and disgusting, to insult Bilal, and insulted his mother. And the Prophet's actions after that he was stubborn, he was adamant in his, relations or his responses with Abu Dhar. He was stubborn. So it shows that in Islam, we don't have any tolerance for racism. But if you do make a mistake like Abu Dhar, even if it's not at the same weight of what Abu Dhar did, learn that you can change. Abu Dhar could change. He learned what his mistake was. He went back. He asked Bilal for forgiveness. And after that, throughout his life, he was very persistent and consistent in improving his stance on racism or his stance on race relations. So learn that it's okay to struggle with this, because even the best of people have struggled with it. And to kind of like complement self-reflection, like Sabri was saying, educate yourself. And like Atal was like, he put a really good emphasis on like the historical significance. And inshallah, I have a few reading materials that I've shared that, and also like documentaries and movies that will help educate you on not only like racism and the history of it in this country and in the world, but what it is now and how it's culminated to what it is today. I think that like one of the best like documentaries to watch is 13th. It gives a very good explanation of how since the beginning of this country, our Black peers have been traumatized, have been, have been oppressed in this country. And when you educate yourself, you'll be able to point out when you call people out, or that's how you know how to explain. Because like someone was saying earlier, in your nafs, you know something's wrong, but if you don't educate yourself, you won't know how to call people out and explain to them what they're saying is wrong. So not only educate yourself so that you can understand and learn, but educate yourself so that you can call out others and teach others as well. And the second step I have is when you're in like how to act in spaces with your Black peers, when you're improving the situation, after you've educated yourself, how to get out there, how to act. Because what's the point if you have all this knowledge? You could read all the books in the world, you could watch all of it, but if you sat there and did nothing, then that knowledge would go to waste. So change isn't easy. So like this whole activism thing, it's not something that you're gonna, people aren't gonna clap for you. It's gonna be hard. You're gonna lose some friends, and that's okay. The friends who can improve will be there for you. They'll change themselves too. They'll educate themselves too. But sometimes in the process of calling out, you're gonna lose some friends, and that's okay. And those are people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't want there for you because they, couldn't accept these things, or couldn't unlearn certain things, or couldn't learn certain things. And so change isn't going to come easy. You might lose some people along the way, but if you truly believe in this change, and if you truly believe in becoming anti-racist and creating this community, especially in this city, you're going to push through discomfort or feeling uncomfortable. And when you're in spaces and you're having conversations, if you're feeling uncomfortable, ask yourself, why is this making me uncomfortable? Like, why don't I feel comfortable being around my Black peers talking about this? Is it because you know that you have these flaws in yourself and you're afraid that they're going to call you out? Think about what makes you uncomfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable, because that's how we grow. When you're doing like math or science, when you don't get something or when you're not understanding, you get frustrated, but you're still gonna have to learn and push through. And it's the same thing with anything else. When you're not getting it or when you're not understanding, take the time, reflect, talk to people. And when you're feeling uncomfortable, know that it's okay. It's inshallah, like educating yourself, talking to people, having good friends and mentors, having good Black friends and mentors who will call you out when you say something. You're gonna slip up, and that's okay. So another thing is that when you're in spaces of like healing, or when you're in spaces of organizing or when you've been invited to certain spaces with your Black peers, there are 4 major verbs or actions that I really want to emphasize. And Fatima mentioned the first one is to listen. Listen to their stories, listen to their experiences, because you will never fully understand. And like Sabria was saying earlier, they're not asking you to understand. Even as a brown person, or even as a person of color, I might experience racism, but it will never be to the extent that my Black peers have faced it. And I don't carry the same trauma that they have to because of what their ancestors have been through. So understand that you might experience racism. Yes, you might experience Islamophobia, but your Black peers experience it at a much greater extent than you will ever do. And it's okay, you'll never understand, but you have to be there to support them for it. So first thing, listen. And then the next two steps go together is appreciate and validate. When they're sharing with you, that means they trust you. They want you to listen to them. So you need to appreciate them for having the courage to be vulnerable and validate their experiences. Just, you might have never said, any derogatory terms, but if they've heard it, like validate their experiences, say that, like, that hurts you. And like, I understand that hurts you, and I know that I won't understand the effect of that term on me ever, but I want you to know that I'm there for you, and you can hold me accountable to never using terms like that. So validate their experiences and make sure you can hold yourself accountable to supporting them. And the last thing is apologizing. So we're humans, we're flawed, we're gonna make mistakes, especially in our language. Be mindful about the language you use, especially around your Black peers, because out of your unintended ignorance, you could harm them. So like Fatima has been saying, like, these microaggressions add up. So, and when you use a microaggression, or if your Black friends call you out, or even if non-Black friends call you out, apologize. And when you apologize, there are two things to remember. Apologize without justification, because when you apologize without justification, that's not apologizing anymore. That's just you making an excuse. The second one is when you apologize from a place of knowing why you're apologizing. Don't just say, I'm sorry. Say, I'm sorry because I did this, and I understand this is wrong because X, Y, Z, and you can hold me accountable from now on. Inshallah, I'm going to try my best not to do this again. So that's kind of like how to, hold yourself accountable and how to behave in a space, either where you've been invited or where you are inviting others for speaking out. Then another thing I want to mention about like being in spaces of organizing or activism, you're not going to be invited to every single healing circle. You're not going to be invited to every single place of activism, because your Black peers, non-Muslim and Muslim, need their own healing spaces sometimes, because like I said earlier, you will never understand, or you will never feel what they're feeling, and they need separate spaces to deal with that sometimes. And because you don't understand that, you don't need to be in that space. And when that happens, don't go and accuse them of exclusion, because they've been through so much and they don't need you doing that on top of that right now. And then the last thing I want to mention as like a step is, Ata also said it, is like going back to your own cultural communities or your own racial communities or your own homes. You need to, when your Black peers are not present, you still need to be consistent in your actions. So learn the difference between calling in and calling out. I know a lot of young people nowadays and a lot of activism spaces, we're encouraged to call in and be nice, talk to people on a personal level, but sometimes you need to understand that you need to put your foot down and call people out, because calling in doesn't work for everyone, because they'll just use that as a pass to keep on going. When you call someone out, even if it's in public, that'll make them realize that, okay, I made a mistake. And when they feel like they've been called out, it'll make them feel more pressured to change or to reflect and think about what I did was wrong. And then the last thing about being in your own spaces or like your own cultural spaces is that after you've educated yourself, after you've self-reflected, it is your responsibility to go back to your community and share with them what you have had to learn for yourself and what you have had to unlearn for yourself. Because a lot of our cultures have hidden implicit biases that we don't think about. Back in middle school, I played a lot of soccer, and it was outdoor soccer. So it was like I used to get dark really quickly. And one time, one of my mom's friends was like, "Oh, you look like you came from Africa." And I was like, "What's wrong with that? Like, what's wrong? Like, what's wrong with looking like you're from Africa? Like, I know it changed, and my skin is gonna go back to what it used to be if I stay inside for a while. But why do you feel the need to comment on that, or why do you need to, talk about it like that?" And I understand that, it's a lot of our elders, especially in the Muslim community, have a hard time taking criticism, even if it's not about their racial comments, even in general about the way they do things. So your family best, the aunties or the uncles that you spend time with best, and that they're not going to appreciate if you call them out in front of everybody at like a dinner party or at a halaqah and say like, "Oh, that's not right." Like, they're going to feel targeted. They're going to feel like Fatema's saying, we call people out or call them in out of love, but they're going to think that, oh, they just want me to look bad in front of anyone. So take them aside, talk to them, explain to them, really nicely that I think that, this is how I see it. And, maybe you didn't realize, but this, if you said this in front of other people, it could hurt them too. So I think that calling out is important, but you know the people that you spend your time around best. So you need to make that judgment call. Is this the time to call in, or is this the time to call out? Because you might have some friends who have unintended ignorance, and that calling out might kind of like deter them, and that might not be the right thing, and that wasn't their intention. So maybe pulling them aside and like explaining to them nicely is more effective than calling them out in front of everyone. It just depends on the person. And I think that one thing that like I really want to emphasize is this whole thing about like right now, this is really intense, this attention towards the Black Lives Matter movement because of all the killings that have happened and how it's it's all over social media. But remember, it's not a moment, it's a movement. And people think that it's over after one share or one post, but that's not it. Some people will have one post saying like Black Lives Matter or Blackout Tuesday, and the next one is like very derogatory. It's not, you need to be consistent in what you do. And if you don't understand why this is like it's not trendy to be like right now it's trendy to be woke, but if you're not woke when your Black peers are not there or within your own homes, then you're not really woke. And I think the last thing to remember that I want to tie everything into is Surah Al-Asr. We're Muslims, and I mean, a lot of us know this surah. It's a very short surah, only 3 ayahs, but for me, it's something that it's really scary to think about. Like Allah is swearing, and He's saying that humanity is in loss unless you are righteous and you're committing to righteous deeds. So like this, like going back to like seeking the pleasure of Allah and doing righteous deeds, just use that as your intention. Because if you're like being an activist or like wanting to like have that title of an ally, but if you're not doing it for the right intention, all of those good deeds that you got are going to go down the drain, and you're not going to gain anything out of it. So yeah, that's the end. Thank you so much for listening and everyone for coming. I know it's like been over an hour, so like thank you for staying the whole time and showing up.
I think we still have our Q&A too. So everyone who's coming, we didn't expect it to be this long, but where's Mariam?
Yeah, no, I'm here. Well, thanks guys. Thanks Zahra, Sabria, Fatima, and Dotza for your amazing insight. We can just go ahead and start with the Q&A. We have already questions that were submitted to us, but if you have more questions, you can direct message them to me in the chat, and I'll ask them. So starting off with the first question, how do you approach your peers, parents, and elders in a respectful way when they say things that are biased? And whoever wants to take that one can.
So like I just touched on it really quickly earlier, but understanding like you have to do it in a very specific way, because if you don't do it, that will deter them, and you might get a very even like more ignorant or even more angry response back. So you have to be very careful in the way you do it. Make sure that depending on who you're talking to, but for most adults, especially our elders, you want to take them aside where it's just you and that person, so they don't feel like they're being targeted or you're trying to make them look bad in front of everyone. Because a lot of people have that complex. They're like, oh, she's calling me out or he's calling me out because they want me to look bad in front of others or because they don't like me. So, and like reminding them, like what Fatima was saying earlier, is that I'm telling you this out of love because I care about you and I don't want you to be living with this ignorant mindset. But make sure that depending on who you're talking to, if you use very strong words like ignorant, it might shut them down immediately. You need to know what to say so that they listen to you. Because what's your goal? To get them to listen so that they can change their ways, to get them to change their understanding or their mindset. So to do that, you can't use radical words like ignorant or arrogant or racist, because that will immediately shut them down. And then whatever you say after, they're going to only listen to respond, and they're not going to listen to hear and understand. So that's kind of like my take on it.
I want to add a little bit actually, because even though I'm African and I have African families, actually sometimes African people come here with biases about Black people. And so actually I had to have some conversation within my own family. And kind of what I had to do was I just brought kind of facts, you know, things you can't argue with. I mean, you know, this is the situation of Black people in this country, and just explaining like systematic racism and like the reason why Black people are where they're at, you know, right now, you know, and it's hard to acknowledge that your own family has, you know, certain biases and presumptions about Black people. But, you know, once I, you know, kind of said, okay, this is not it, right? And then I brought them the facts, you know, just kind of some simple explanations about why, for example, they have the assumption Black people are lazy, things like that. Yeah, so just bringing those up actually opened their minds so much, now so much so that they correct my own family, my other family members, you know, when they say things, or other Africans that say things, they correct them. They're like, you know, they bring up the facts that I taught them, sometimes even better than I, you know, said it. So, you know, sometimes you just need to open someone's eyes, and that's all they need to understand, you know, the situation. So I just wanted to put that out there because I'm Black, but I had to kind of address that, you know, because I'm African as an immigrant.
Can I also add, I don't know if Atta was going to, but I think that one thing to remember, I think with all of this, which I wanted to touch on before, is that like this is like a marathon, like this is life, right? And so when we go into things, that's why intentionality is so important. Like your intention should be like, I'm doing this because I want like you to get better, and I'm doing it for the sake of Allah, and I wanted, and like as Muslims we believe in like commanding the good and forbidding the evil, right? And so you can't be so attached to the outcome. So my dad, he raised me on like just like, in general when I'm doing things, like don't be attached to like the outcome, especially other people's outcome. So when you're going to people, first have adab, like be very like respectful, and knowing your audience, like what are they going to take, what are they going to listen to, relatability. So make sure you kind of relate it back to people. Empathy is like really important, but part of empathy is like yourself, right? So relating it back to themselves. Like I teach, and I remember one time it was like 2, 3, 4th graders, I think. And then one of them called the other one. They're like, he was like, oh, like he called me fat. He was crying, right? So I had to like sit there and like talk to one of them. And I was like putting a lot on yourself, like putting a lot on himself. I was like, how would you feel if somebody like says this about you and this about you? And like as Muslims especially, we really talk about how like we're victims all the time. So like touch on that. You know what I mean? Like if you feel like a victim, imagine how these people feel. And like, are you putting forward that like oppressor thing? If you feel like someone's oppressing you, are you being that oppressor? So just like really relatability. And then also just, that's why I said, don't be attached to the outcome. So you do what you can do. Don't be so attached, like, okay, if these people change, like, oh, why am I going to be so stressed about like these people not changing? Like Allah will guide who he wills, right? He says it all the time to Islam, but in general about things, he's going to grant people some knowledge. He's going to not grant some people knowledge. You do your part in like saying things and letting people know, presenting the information, but don't be attached to like, if they don't take it. If they don't take it, that's on them. You fulfilled your responsibility. And you do what you can, but also just knowing your audience, and then don't be so like, I need people to like appreciate me. The other thing is, my last thing about this point is that a lot of times people who are like woke, like Zahra said, and then people who learn new information. So a lot of you are learning new information because of all this happening. So you're like realizing a lot about yourself. You can't dump that all on somebody else. So just because you know everything, like you know all the anti-racist language, you know all these books, you know everything, that doesn't mean they do, and they might not be ready to take it. Everyone takes everything in stages. So don't go and push all your information and all your facts and bring facts, but don't bring all of your like everything on that person and dump it all on them. So they're like, I don't even know what to do. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to keep living my life, you know? So like be very wise about what you do. So think about what you do. That's why I said you have to be super self-aware and everything in your whole life. Like part of life is being aware and being intentional. So your intention going to that is, I'm trying to command the good, forbid the evil. I'm doing it because I want to see like my Muslim brothers and sisters grow, whoever it is. And I'm doing it with adab. So I'm doing it in a way, I'm not just like yelling at you and being like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're like so ignorant. Even in that story, like I told that story in my video about like Abu Dhar, like the Prophet said, I'm sad. Like, you know, you have ignorance in your heart. You have it in you, which isn't really effective. Like if someone like was like saying, and it's talk about the Prophet, if someone said that to me, I'd be like heartbroken, right? But he didn't say like, you are so ignorant, you're never going to change, like these kinds of things. I think a lot of times when we like are like really impacted by something, we're like immediately like, no, like blah, blah. And you're just trying to push all this information on someone. Be very gentle, be very patient, because you want someone to be patient with you in bringing new information. And then just don't be attached. Like if they don't take it, okay, maybe they'll take it 10 years from now. Maybe they'll realize like later, like, oh, like, you know, that was right. I remember that point. They might not take it at that moment. So don't be so like, this person didn't take it, so I'm never going to say anything again.
I just want to add to Sabria's point, particularly about relatability. Yeah, human beings, they love when the spotlight's turned on them. That's when they understand everything completely. They understand all the complexities and all that. I just want to relate a conversation I had with one of my Palestinian buddies. So we were talking about what's going on. This is about a few days ago. We're talking about what's going on, and he goes, look at what they're doing to all these businesses, all these stores. Look what they're doing to the police, throwing stuff at them. You know, they're breaking the law. So now this guy's Palestinian, okay? Like if you were to cut his heart open, it'd bleed out like the Palestinian flag colors, okay? So I talked to him. I said, yeah, I was like, I wanted to test him. I want to see what he would be like. I was like, yeah, it reminds me of like when people back in our village, a couple of people got arrested for throwing rocks at the Israeli police. So I said, yeah, it's like those people that were throwing rocks at the Israeli police. And he goes, huh? And I go, yeah, they broke the law, man. They shouldn't have been doing that. And he goes, yeah, but the laws are unjust. I'll go, yeah. So, but they still broke the law. And he's like, yeah, but no, it's unjust laws. So resistance against unjust laws, it's okay. I was like, well, look at you, man. You should be out in the streets with them. You agree. Like you agree. I basically laid bare to him that, okay, the only difference is, you know, who's doing the protesting, who's doing this. And so that's when I got him to kind of concede. He's like, oh, okay, I see what you're saying now. And like he's embarrassed, you know, like I kind of got him. And, you know, again, that's not to shame him, but it just shows the potency, the strength of using pushing it back on someone else. Like they'll feel everything, you know. It's like that phrase, you judge yourself by your intentions, but you judge everyone else by their actions. You're willing to give yourself the benefit of the doubt, your people, by extension, your country, but you're not willing to do that to others. So just flashing that light on them, goes a long way towards helping someone combat ignorance.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. The second question is actually submitted by the audience. And it says, what about people who might not find it that hard to acknowledge and stand in solidarity with Black Muslims, but rather find it hard to support Black non-Muslims? How can we move beyond solidarity with just Black Muslims only?
Okay, so I'll go first. So I think it's really interesting. So I'm gonna do a little calling out here now. Okay, like I said, it's out of love. So like this is why I said you have to really go to the root of things. So when, for example, the shooting at, was it the Jewish temple, right? So when we have these like other faiths that are hurt, we like to think of like, oh, as faith communities, like we need to like stand with each other. So when people, for example, like go to Jewish temples and things like that, I see heckle Muslims like, oh, we need to like start fundraisers, blah, blah, blah. And like all the time, or even when we have like, just like killings like in neighborhoods of like kids or just things like that. I'm not discrediting any of that. But a lot of times we have like hypocrisy when it comes to like Black issues. So that's why I'm saying you have to do a lot of like thinking. So why do when some communities get affected, we're like, oh my gosh, we need to stand in solidarity, blah, blah, blah. But like when it's like Black people, it's like silent. So think about that first, about like, why is that? Because we always say like, especially when I've seen so many people at interfaith dinners. I've been at plenty of interfaith dinners all the time. As brothers and sisters in faith, or as brothers and sisters in humanity, we need to let go of these things. We need to come together, these things. So why are Black people different now? You know, so like kind of think about those things about like why do you have that thought about like, oh, like, but they're not Muslim. But when we go to like any kind of Christian thing, or when like people shoot up churches or like something like that, then it's like nothing. Like, oh, it's like, yeah, we need to fully support. So like I just like want people to think about like, where does that come from? About why do I now need to think about the humanity? Because you don't ask other people to do that for you. You don't ask when things happen to mosque, you don't ask people, oh, just because like I'm Muslim, so I don't expect you to have that kind of respect for me. You expect that same respect for somebody else. So why don't you do it to other people? When the New Zealand thing happened, I expect people should feel in solidarity with people because they're people. I expect like anybody, Jewish, Christian, anyone, atheist, I don't really care. As a person, you don't want that to happen to your family. So kind of like think about like, why do you have that thing when it comes to Black people? So I just want people to like do a lot of thinking, because it's a lot of hypocrisy when I hear these conversations, even just that idea of like, oh, but like they're not like Muslim, so like why? But I'm like, for every other group of people, you're like willing to totally go all in, and like we need to fully support. But like when it comes to these Black issues, then it's like silent. So that's my kind calling out. I just want people to think a little deeper.
So the question is, how can we show solidarity to non-Muslim Black communities? Okay, there's one language that everyone in the world speaks. There's one language that every country, every people, every tribe, every nation in the past to present speaks. That's money. That's money, okay? Donate. You need to speak with your wallet. Open that purse. Hashtag open that purse. By donating, by contributing, okay? By contributing to Black struggles against injustice. They don't have to be Muslim per se. That's a great first step in solidarity. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you guys for that response. It was amazing. Moving forward, someone asks, what about Palestine, Kashmir, Yemen, Syria? Why don't we give them attention? Why is it, and in that same note, why is it not all lives matter?
So why don't we give those places attention? Well, why aren't you listening? The fact of the matter is people have been giving those causes considerable attention. In fact, they've been asking for more people to raise their voices for a long time. So put your money where your mouth is. Act, okay? Do it. Be the change that you want to see. Secondly, I'd like to say that these instances are only brought up when it's Black struggles that are being elevated. Whenever it's any other thing going on, if you see a Facebook video about the famine going on in Yemen, you do not see Syrians flocking to the comment section saying, oh, but we're still, like, what about Bashar Assad? You don't see Palestinians going to this. You don't see them derail the conversation. You see them express, oh, from Palestine with love, or man, I wish the Middle East would be more peaceful. It's only when Black voices and Black struggles against injustices are brought up, then all of a sudden you care about everything. You care about the struggles of an indigenous tribe in Papua New Guinea. You've never ever spoken about these issues before. Second of all, I want to point out that I've noticed it's this particular group of people that do this stuff, not exclusively, but mostly. It's mostly Western Palestinians, Western Syrians, Western fill in the blank who usually do this stuff. Oh, why don't people care about our issues? But if you actually go to the places themselves, you saw there's Black Lives Matter protests in Palestine. There's of course, everyone's seen that mural with George Floyd on it in Syria on rubble. And the last one it's these people who are actually living through these experiences you claim to care about, they're taking time out of their day to show respect and solidarity. And what are you doing? You're on Twitter, man. Get up, go outside, do something. And then the last thing I want to say is, if you think that Black folks in particular are not speaking out for other injustices, again, you're not listening. You just don't want to listen. Our brother Arthur Richards, he posted something. He reminded me, I completely forgot about it. He reminded me, Black public figure Mark Lamont Hill, he got fired from his job at CNN because he spoke up for Palestine. He spoke up for Palestine. More personal experience, one of my friends, I don't want to out his full name, but he goes by the nickname TNT. He's huge in the Memphis activism community. You will not see him anywhere without a hatta on his neck, or because of the coronavirus now he's using that as a mask. When I saw him at one of the protests this week, I saw him, he was in the middle of chanting, marching, speaking, everything. The first thing he said when he saw me, free Palestine, man, free Palestine. So he took time out of his struggle, and then like he's actively struggling for his rights, and he took time to remind me, like, we're in this together. And I was like, man, he always talks about Palestine. He always wears a hatta. Man, are you sure you're not Palestinian? It's to that point, So if you're crying about why don't they do this about other causes, spare the crocodile tears. That's all I have to say.
I also want to add one more thing. So I think it's important. I was having this conversation with Fatima yesterday, actually, and I was saying, like, people forget that, like, we always quote this hadith about, like, the ummah is one body, right? But think about the idea that literally, so when the Prophet ﷺ existed, and for most of history, we're living in a modern time where we're very connected to everything else. But most of history, we weren't. So the only thing you know is what's around you. And so if you've ever read any hadith about, like, the neighbors, like taking care of your neighbors, and like scholars like will put neighbors like your whole city. So like taking care of your neighbors, you're going to be responsible. You're going to be asked about your neighbors. Okay, so I don't think that, like, you do what you can with other people, like circle of like care, and then your influence, right? Your sphere of influence. So you care about other places. You make dua for other places. If you can, donate to other places. But are you gonna sit there at your house when your neighbors, like there's a fire everywhere, and you're just gonna sit and like, I only care about what happens overseas? Okay, you're not gonna be asked. I promise you, God might ask you about, did you make dua and did you donate? But he's not gonna ask you about so and so overseas. He's gonna ask you about what you did there when you had the opportunity, when you were just sitting on your behind on your couch crying about like, oh, but everyone doesn't talk about my issue. They talk about, it's not even your issue. That's the problem. Like he said, it's not your issue anymore. Now you're here. So your issue is what happens around you. God is going to ask you about what you did for the people around you. And if you were just sitting there on your phone because you're like, I don't really care about these issues, I'm just caring about other overseas, that's not what I want to be asked on Judgment Day. The Prophet literally, like the Sahaba used to talk about like giving to your neighbors and making sure your neighbors were full, like so much that they thought it was literally going to be like, I have to like let my neighbor live with me. So we are your, like, Black people are your neighbors now. Not only your brothers and sisters, but we are your neighbors now. So know that you're going to be held accountable for what you do and what you don't do here.
I just want to add one thing, kind of, one sentiment I saw going with this is that the Muslim community hasn't supported, like one response, because I posted about this the other day. I was so upset about it, I couldn't sleep, and so this is just kind of talking about how, you care about your brothers and sisters. Some of the things you say hurt us, and so I posted about it the other day, and kind of one response I got was that the Muslim community hasn't showed out like this before, for these issues. And like, I mean, Atta already mentioned this, so I just wanted to kind of second him, basically, is that we have talked about this all this time, so don't at this moment now, when you say this, it really hurts. It just hurts it hurts your brothers and sisters that you say that you care about, so I just wanted to add that in there.
I just want to quickly go off of what Sabria was saying, is that there's the Prophet ﷺ, there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says that Jibreel came to me so many times talking to me about the rights of the neighbors that I thought that I would have to include my neighbor in my will, he would get inheritance. And so now that we're here, Allah's going to ask you about your neighbor. The neighbor holds so much importance and significance in our deen. And now your neighbors are not people who live hundreds of thousands of miles away. It's the people who live in your city.
Thank you all for that. Okay, so the fifth question is, why is it insensitive to share videos of Black folks dying at the hands of cops?
I think we don't all, I can just answer this one quickly. First, please don't do it. I've had multiple people, I've posted multiple times, and then multiple people still ask me after I posted about why can I not do this? One, first of all, who likes people? I don't know anybody who likes, maybe you guys like watching movies, but in real life, nobody likes to see people dying. It's just a very uncomfortable thing. And it's very traumatic. People, for example, kids will talk about years later when they watch their parents die, it was really traumatic experience. So it's a traumatic experience for anyone to see anybody die on camera, and especially such a terrible death. Second of all, it's very traumatic for Black people. I will tell you, I never watch videos. I never look at pictures. As soon as I see someone post a picture, I'm moving on. I never watch it, because for me, it brings up so much. I'm like, oh my God, that could be me. That could be my kids. That could be my brother. That could be my dad. It's a very emotional thing, especially when you see it on repeat. I understand that people feel the need to spread awareness, because a lot of times these things don't get called out for unless they're on camera. But I promise you, most of you are not the people that's what's going to change the police's mind. By the time you got it, the people who needed to see it saw it already. So you're just posting it. Realize, what are your intentions about posting it? Why am I posting this, right? Am I doing it to spread awareness? Are there other ways that I can spread awareness? What are ways that I can do that? Can I talk about the names? Can I say these things? You don't have to post the videos. Realize it's a very traumatic thing. It's very inappropriate also. I would not, if that was me or that was my family member, I wouldn't want that last video of them, that's the position that they're in to see for everybody. And there are literally people, I'm sure you guys have seen this whole George Floyd meme challenge or whatever. That's why, because people put this out so much that it becomes a joke. And we are on the internet. We're in the day of the internet. I can scroll, I can see one thing about Palestine, I can see one thing about Black Lives Matter, and then I can see someone post a meme. So these things, our brain just changes everything is entertainment, especially when it's entertainment. It's just entertainment minded. So it looks like entertainment. So that's why people can make it entertainment. So don't, this is a very serious thing. someone's putting in the chat now, you don't want to desensitize yourself at all. And like, that's why when you'll see like real deaths, then you'll be like, oh, it doesn't affect me. It's like people now are seeing so much, like you're just so numb because it's like every other day you're seeing something else and you're desensitized to it. And as people, that's like, mean, you don't want your heart to harden towards that. Like, this is something that we should be very like affected by. But if you're just sharing it and then you're sharing jokes and then you're sharing like cooking videos, like that's not cute. So please don't do it. I'm not going to say it again. I've said it multiple times. People have still asked me after I've said it if they can do it. Don't. You're not, I'm promising you, you're not the one who's groundbreaking. You're not the one who they're going to be like, wow, this person shared this video, so we need to keep these people accountable. You're not the person. So don't do it.
I kind of want to add a little bit real quick. Also, actually, I didn't realize the trauma Black death has on Black people until recently. I realized some traumas that I have dealing, related to this, why I don't watch any videos, what came from my childhood. Like, Black people have been dealing with this trauma all their lives. And like, I mean, to the point that I can't even like, I can't stomach it when I see even the picture, even the cartoon drawing of the incident. It hurts, and like it goes back actually to the trauma from my childhood, because these are conversations we have to have since we are young. And so that's the kind of thing you're kind of stirring up when you share these images and stuff. So I just wanted to share that.
Yep, thank you so much. The next question is, are we doing enough to give our Black scholars and aspiring Black Muslims a platform?
I mean, I think now with like social media and stuff, like people can kind of give themselves their own platform. I think that in this space, it's interesting. So I think that there is a responsibility on other people to kind of like talk about it, right? Like, I shouldn't be the only person talking about it as a Black person. I'm not going to talk to your family. Like, people say like, oh, like, how do we tell our elders? So like, that is not my job. I'm not going to talk to your family. I don't know your family. Your family's probably not going to listen to me. That's your job. But in like public spaces and things like that, like, unless you're coming with the perspective, for example, of Zahra and Ata, like, of like, as like an ally thing, you don't need to take over the conversation of like, I need to like stand for Black. I need to like speak for like Black people, like what Black people feel. Like, no, like, unless it's in your spaces where that is appropriate, if there are Black people already doing it, you probably don't need to. So I think Black people can kind of make their own spaces. Now, are you supporting those spaces? That's what to me is more important, because now there are so many organizations that are already out there. Yeah, don't be a voice for the voices passing mic. That's Dr. Swad Abdul Kabir. I love her. So like now Black people already have these organizations. I'll tell you, like, organizations been here for years. We already have these places. We already have these things. Are you supporting those things? You don't need to like try to make these like, I need to make this like person like be like a Black scholar. We already have Black scholars. Support those people. I think that's like the most important thing.
You're right. And the final question that we'll end on is, how do we prevent this from being a moment rather than a movement?
Stay educated, keep on tabs with what's going on. Police brutality in the US is not a new phenomenon. This is an everyday phenomenon for years. The last uprising we had was in 2015 with Freddie Gray. And people are quick to forget it. And it's about controlling your intentions. It's about saying, why are you doing this? Okay, are you sharing the social media post because everyone else is sharing it? Are you sharing it because you feel compelled to share it? Are you sharing it because you genuinely care about these issues? And of course, when we genuinely care about issues, we have an imperative, we have an obligation to pursue those issues, to be educated about those issues. We need to learn it's about these small little pebbles of institutional racism that adds up to create the huge avalanches that is like, the viral mainstream news. So I think another thing also is important is to kind of building off the theme of caring for your neighbors, see what's going on in your local community, because if anyone who's involved in the local community knows, there's always something going on, whether it's to do with justice for public transportation, or whether it's an election campaign for a particular candidate, or whether it's something about zoning law, you will find on the micro scale, on the local scale, you will find it's a beehive of activities, and there's no shortage of problems that people are fighting to face. So go out there, ask people around, ask for people in the know in these activist circles and spaces, and see what's going on. Educate yourself about it. It's a lot more investment when it's your neighbors, your streets, your friends that are involved in the struggle, as opposed to, something a little bit more abstract when you turn on CNN and you see something going on in Maine, or you see something going on in California. Not to say neglect stuff that doesn't happen in your locale, but if you do that, your brain, the way you act, you'll recognize patterns, you'll recognize trends, and you'll see it everywhere you are. You will not forget it like that. And I'll end with that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, going back to like what Apla said about like education, when you educate yourself and when you learn how systematic and intentional racism is in this country, how intentional anti-Blackness is in this country, you're gonna care a lot more about it. And like it's gonna like automatically, like when you know enough about it, when you see it, when you understand it, it's gonna become more of a movement for you than a moment. Because for the people that it's a moment for, they don't really understand what it's for. They know it's not right what the police is doing, but they don't know how many times it's happened. They don't know how long it's been happening for. So when you truly understand, of course, you'll never completely understand it, but when you do a lot more digging, when you do a lot more self-reflection, when you think about these things, it's like if you take these steps, just a few steps, these are going to completely change your attitude. Like Otto was saying, like these small pebbles, if a mountain is built of pebbles, if you take out enough of them, it's going to fall. And a lot of like organizers, activists use like diagrams to like illustrate like systems of oppression. And one of them is like this like triangle that's like held up by pillars. And if you take out enough of the pillars, it'll fall through. So think of like my understanding of racism is a certain way, or my understanding or my assumptions about my Black peers are a certain way, and there are certain pillars holding that up. So like take out some of those pillars. So education is one way, talking and validating and listening to your Black peers is another way. When you pull out these few pillars, the whole thing's gonna fall down.
I would also say I'm seeing a lot of like, because it's a very like trendy social media thing, like a lot of people are like tired of it. Like they're like, okay, like let's move on. Like, this is why, like, you have to really know, like, why you're doing it. Because this is a lifelong thing, girl. This is established for 400 years. People, like, is to put their whole lives into this. So you can't do this for 3 days and be like, okay, like, no, I'm tired of it. You know what I mean? Like, if your intention from the beginning was that I'm doing this to please Allah and I'm doing it because I'm establishing the good, I'm following the sunnah or whatever, like, then you won't really get discouraged, because first of all, the one thing you have to always know as a Muslim is that this is the dunya, okay? So, like, you are not going to fix everything. This is like, we already talked about anti-Blackness has been around since the day, literally the first day that Adam was created. Like, Satan was like basically the first racist, right? So that's why I say like Muslims really need to be careful when that's their issue. It's a very like spiritual disease, because like when the Quran says like don't follow in the footsteps of Shaitan, like what was Shaitan doing the first, that was his first thing, right? So be careful of what you do, but know your intention about like, I'm doing this to please Allah at the end of the day, so I'm going to do all the work that I can. It might not get fixed. It probably won't. You're talking about very strong systems, so your work might not change the whole system, but are you doing it so you can be the one who changes the system, or are you trying to move the ball a little bit? So know what your intention is, because that's why you're doing it. You're trying to just move the ball a little bit. You're doing your part so that you won't be held accountable against it. And then you did your job. You can say like, I did what I could do. And so be consistent in that. So don't make it like just like a cute little Twitter trend. And if you do, if it's not for you, that's okay. Everything doesn't have to be for everybody. I don't think that everyone needs to be out here protesting in the streets. That might not be you. Your movement might be educating your parents, educating your siblings, being educated yourself. It literally might just be your movement throughout your life might just be, I'm just trying to fix myself. But guess what? That's what you're doing. You committed to that. So you don't have to be like an organizer. Like everyone doesn't get to have the spotlight of everything. That might not be your job. Find your purpose of what you can do and make those changes. And then like, give it up to God. Like he's going to take care of it at the end of the day. Like whatever happens is going to happen within his will, but you do what you can.
Thank
Just adding one more point, because my sister was listening to, I think Ustad's Aisha earlier, Aisha Prime, and she was saying like this is just one arm of many like different systems that oppress Black people in this country, and so kind of one thing too is like being aware of what those are and where you can do something about it. A lot of our people in our community are going to medical school and becoming doctors. The healthcare system has so much problems when it comes to Black people and how it treats Black patients and all that. So what you're becoming a doctor, well, what can you do about that to pay attention to that? When you go to college, college spaces that are anti-Black and all that. How do you feel about that, and what will you do? And then also take them Africana study classes, because the Black professors, I'm sorry, they're not valued like the rest of the professors on campus. Things like that. Just be intentional and see and look at any aspect. Like Saria said, your movement can be in any aspect, different aspects, and kind of look at that for yourself. What does that mean? Inshallah.
Thank you all so much for all of your insight and for the profound words. For the sake of time, we won't be able to answer all of the questions that were submitted, just because we want to share with you guys some resources we compiled for everyone to really check out. So I'm just going to share my screen and Atta will go through them with you guys just very quickly.
And yeah, guys, please feel free to take screenshots, take photos of these slides. They could be very beneficial. Furthermore, this will be on YouTube, I believe. Right?
Yes, it will be on YouTube, and also all of these resources will be in our Instagram bio if you'd like to check it out afterwards.
So here are some documentaries and movies to watch. When They See Us and Who Killed Malcolm X are Netflix originals, and the 13th, I believe, is also on Netflix. There's also Just Mercy and The Hate U Give.
Just want to quickly say something. Just Mercy is streaming for free on Amazon, so you can rent it for $0.00. And the story is based in Alabama, which is very close to home. So that's something I definitely recommend everyone to watch.
And yeah, so if you guys would like to take a picture of this as well, and like we said, it'll be online and archived. These are a lot of great books to read. How to Be an Anti-Racist in particular, I can vouch for how good of a book that is. That addresses anti-Blackness in general in the US. And then you have books given by Black Muslim voices, and you have books talking about the history of Black Muslims. In particular, the last one you'll see, Servants of Allah, African Muslims Enslaved in the Americas by Sylvain Diouf. That book it goes in a little bit deeper into some of the names I brought up in my segment. Of course, you have something talking about anti-incarceration, mass incarceration, the new Jim Crow. And yeah, you guys see the list for yourselves. So these are places to visit in Memphis, National Civil Rights Museum, of course, and the Slave Haven Underground Railroad Museum. These give context to the brutal realities Black ancestors have faced, and they're really humbling experiences when you go visit them.
Also, another place I would suggest, it just depends on, I didn't want to put it on there because it's not for everyone, but a lot of lynchings have taken place in Memphis, and Facing History, which is a nonprofit, and they also have a chapter here in Memphis, has worked with the lynching project to make sure that these places have historical landmarks, or have made these historical landmarks, so we recognize the trauma of our Black peers and their ancestors, and we admit and acknowledge that our city, our people have done terrible things, and we're taking accountability for it. So if that's something that if your mental health can support that, then I totally recommend going to those places, reading what happened to these people, so that you understand that 100 years ago, L. Persons was lynched, and his death certificate said that he didn't die because he was lynched, but from unknown causes, just like George Floyd's coroner report said that he died from underlying health causes. That happened in 1917, and that's over 100 years ago, and we're still having these same problems. So when you see that, it'll make it more real for you, I think. And it's helped me too.
So these are some organizations you guys can donate to. We have the Memphis Bail Fund. Please donate to that. First Congregational Church. They have a supply drive Sunday, June 7th from 12 o'clock p.m. to 4 o'clock p.m. A good friend of mine put me onto this one, so shout out, you know who you are. And then there are miscellaneous things you can donate to. There's that link. It's 115 ways to donate in support of Black Lives Matter and communities of color. It has a lot of categories like homeless Black youth or Black religious spaces. It's very detailed, very niche. So if you guys have something that you're particularly passionate about, I think there's even a category for Black artists. Please feel free to check that out and donate. And some organizations to support. Of course, we have the Midtown Mosque here in Memphis. We have Amin, AMIN, and we have Facing History and Ourselves. So, and then some online resources to check out. Sapelo Square and the Muslim ARC or Muslim ARC Anti-Racism Collaborative, and Bayan Online Islam in Black America, presented by Dr. Sherman Jackson. Go ahead.
I wanted to add about the Bayan Online thing. So Bayan Online is a graduate school, but they recently just let the Islam in Black America for free for anybody to sign up for. So I'm telling you, Dr. Jackson, you're not gonna find a scholar more knowledgeable about this fact than Dr. Jackson. He's wrote multiple books. He's first of all, one of the most intelligent religious scholars, and then especially in history and in Black Muslim history. So I highly suggest to take this class. If you don't do anything else, sign up for that class on Bayan Online and take it.
Definitely. Dr. Sherman Jackson is a pillar in Islamic scholarship, especially here in America. And one of his books is on the list before. Mm-hmm. And finally, here's some Twitter accounts to follow. These are, one of the questions was how can we keep in the know? How can we make this a movement rather than a moment? If you keep tabs with these Twitter accounts right here, you will not struggle with that whatsoever, particularly with Black Muslim voices. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot of scholarship in there, personal experiences and stories, organization, poetry, Islamic scholarship, and so forth. And please, everyone watching here, there's 30 of y'all here, and for people watching this not live, if you take anything away from this, please sign this petition. This is to release Imam Jamil al-Amin, and it's a petition urging for a retrial because he was wrongfully convicted in 2002. There's more details in the link below, but please, for everyone's sake, if you watch this video, if you made it this far, please click that link and just take a few minutes out of your time to sign the petition.
Awesome. And I will go ahead and link that document too in the chat, and you guys can check it out. So thank you all so much for attending and for being vulnerable and for engaging in this conversation with us. As we've mentioned, this is the first of many conversations and many discussions that we want to have. We want to definitely have more educational workshops about systemic racism, and more workshops that educate us about what's going on in Memphis specifically. And to end off, we want to end with a dua given by Sister Sabria.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. We ask Allah, Ya Allah, to free all the oppressed people around the world, to help us aid in helping free the oppressed. We ask Allah not to allow us to be oppressors ourselves, to not oppress ourselves, to oppress our Muslim brothers and sisters, our brothers and sisters around the world, to send aid to all those who are suffering mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, in any way. Allah is always on the side of the oppressor, so let us be on your side, and do not let up the oppressed, and do not let us be on the side of the oppressors. Ya Allah, allow us to follow in the footsteps of your Prophet ﷺ, and allow us to follow the book and to be of those who command justice and command the right and forbid the wrong in small ways and in big ways. Ya Allah, do not allow us to be under the power of the oppressed. Do not allow us to be amongst those who are hurt by them, but allow us to be amongst those who are freed from them. Ya Allah, I ask that you aid all of those who are here, who have been vulnerable. Allow us to grow and allow us to get closer to you. Purify our intentions, purify our hearts, and allow us to be of those who strive in your way and who do everything for your sake, and make us those who are beloved to you. Because of those who are beloved to you that you've said in your Quran are those who are just. Allow us to be among those who are just, and allow us to be among those who are witnesses for you. Ya Allah, send aid to all those who are suffering from illnesses, from coronavirus, from anything, people who have been lost their jobs, who have lost their businesses. Ya Allah, send your aid to those. Ya Allah, free us from our oppressors. Do not allow us to be oppressors, Ya Allah, because we have the capacity to be oppressors in any way, in small ways and in big ways. We ask that He send His mercy to us. We ask that He allows us to be merciful and to be beautiful in our freeing of oppression, and to do everything with ihsan, and to do everything that pleases Him. And if we do things that displease Him, because He has made us human, we ask that He forgives us and He sends His mercy and He pardons us and He does not hold us accountable for those things. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala sallam. We're ending Surah Asr. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. So touched that everybody came out, and I feel so emotional right now. But alhamdulillah, thank you for coming out.
And for everyone.